Do you ever have the feeling that you're the only person alive? I mean, really alive. It can be dangerous. Well, I had that feeling, and it was a subtle kind of a feeling, and a feeling of almost unbearable. The word isn't loneliness, really. A kind of unbearable sense of time, place, and perhaps the imminent end of it all. I mean, even if it's 50 years from now or 100 years, that's still imminent. Historically speaking, that's an imminent end. And anyway, how this came about is that I'm on 6th Avenue on Sunday. And it was a cold day. And a cold, brisk, partially sunny day with the sun coming out, you know, in spots and patches and a lot of wind blowing along. And I'm in the general vicinity, going south, by the way, in the general vicinity of Rockefeller Center. And there were a lot of people there. You know, who are all these people that go to who are these people that go to the Radio City Music Hall on the weekends? Where do they come from? Don't they have a movie house at home that shows the same terrible pictures? Huh? I mean, it's amazing, the crowd that gathers there. I'm sure that when all the rest of us are dead and gone, there will still be a crowd gathering outside there. And I'm sure that 1,000 years from now, when they put together the pieces of the Radio City Music Hall, which they will find, of course, buried in the mud and under rocks and scattered in the kitchen middens and all that, when they put it together, they will wonder what kind of temple this was. What sort of rites went on here? How can we explain to them the 4th of July pageant with the Rockettes? How will we be able to explain the Easter pageant with the Rockettes? I'll never forget the one pageant I saw with the Rockettes for Thanksgiving. No, it was 4th of July, come to think of it. They had red, white, and blue neon signs on their heads. Amazing. Battery-operated neon signs with waving flags in the interesting portions of their anatomy. I mean, thereby enabling us to contrive to somehow mix patriotism and that old, wonderful three-letter word together in a family package. Don't think the little kids, of course, the kids are interested in the flags, Daddy's interested in something else, and so we can cover the whole shebang in one great big fell swoop and have 400 of them in formation on the stage. That wonderful thing there. Well, anyway, I'm walking past Radio City and all this jazz, you know, the whole blah is going on, the brouhaha is going, and the people are going back and forth and going into Howard Johnson's and the whole business there. Short, stout ladies with their stays creaking, you know, their corsets popping, and all their Playtexes in the proper place. And they're going there, you see, and not one of them is walking down the street the way they walk down the street in their dreams in their maiden forms. They are really sheathed from head to toe, you know. So there's nothing to look at there, and that's true. And it's funny, when the sun comes out on Sunday, people's skin trouble becomes much more apparent. And what looks great at 2 o'clock in the morning all of a sudden looks skinny and covered with old powder at say, 3:30 the next day. But that's another problem, and one which I'm sure that you do not have to fight. I know that. You're beyond these problems. So I'm walking along, and it's Sunday, and it's a good day. You know, the sun is going, and the wind is whistling, and the cabs are going past, and the great hordes that they're always going past in, and cars and trucks. It seems that Sunday drivers honk more than weekday drivers. Yeah, these are the non-drivers who are out, and they don't know how to work the machine too good, actually, to use the vernacular. And it goes in a straight line for them, and when something gets in the way, they go, Short, stout, fat guys with thick cigars are always sitting up in the front of enormous Cadillacs on Sunday. Have you ever noticed that? Great big Lincolns. And little fat guys are always up there in the front there with their enormous horns honking. That's not a status symbol at all. It goes along with bullfighting. Doesn't have anything to do with status. It has to do with a word that begins with V. It's generally pronounced virility. And so they're honking a horn. It gives the guy something, you know, make him feel like he's really doing something big. He's settling the West or something. He's showing the rest of them. But I'm walking along past there, and I'm in the middle of all this when I became suddenly, inexplicably, eerily aware of a sound which had an almost... Well, have you had momentary tastes or smells or have heard sounds that just for an instant seeped into your consciousness and really into your unconsciousness, because you're usually not conscious of something this subtle. It's an unconscious absorption of it. When suddenly there is a great feeling of sadness and a feeling of something you have missed, something that you once knew maybe, an excitement of some kind that has been lost. Do you know the feeling I'm talking about? It doesn't happen very often, but boy, when it happens, it hits you like a rock right between the eyes. And it hit me on 6th Avenue. There was a sound, a sudden sound. And without thinking, I just instantly looked up. Because it was the kind of sound that somehow associated itself in my mind, subconsciously, with looking up. It's just like a taste will cause you to salivate. Certain bells will cause you to become hungry because this bell used to be rung in school when it was time for lunch or something. You don't even remember it. You know, you automatically go into Howard Johnson's and order a hot dog. You heard the bell. You didn't know why you were suddenly hungry. Well, I looked up, and for crying out loud, what did I see over 6th Avenue? Let me tell you this. Is there anybody else that saw it? Well, this is how I got the feeling of being intensely alone. This whole crowd was pouring into the music hall, and all of them were in and out of Howard Johnson's, and all of them were getting in and out of buses and hollering, and you could hear their corsets popping. And not one of them looked up. I was the only one. And I'm standing on the street corner, and I had the feeling that I wanted to start hollering, hey, look up there, for crying out loud, look. But then I realized that they would all think I'm an idiot and a kook. And you don't want to be thought you're an idiot and a kook, do you, in this sane civilization? Of course not. All those people going in there to see the Rockettes, that's a genuine mark of sanity. On a Sunday, that's the way to spend Sunday. And so I look up there, and what did I see? But a long, thin, waving skein of Canadian geese. Yeah, flying over Radio City. How do you like that? I had heard them. You know how geese sound. Have you ever heard them going? And these babies were up there. Let me tell you, they were flying high. They must have been, maybe 1,500 feet over Manhattan. And this long skein, and they kept jockeying for position. And there must have been 350 of them, or maybe more. It's hard to tell. But that long, wavy line, and way down there at the point, it was a big, crooked V. And they were in V formation, and they were flying in their long-distance beat. You see, geese fly in several ways. There is one way they fly, when you know they're looking for a place to land. You know they're looking for a place to roost overnight. Well, these weren't in that beat. These were in their long-distance beat, which is as steady, you never saw anything like it. Just ba-dum, 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 ba-dum. At about that beat, ba-dum, 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 ba-dum. And they're enormous. I don't know whether you've ever seen a Canadian goose on the ground. They're an unbelievable bird to begin with, and just a magnificent bird. But here they were flying out over Radio City, over Rockefeller Center. And I could see them sort of bracketed there, you know. You could see the 666 building on one side and all these people running in and out of the music hall. And somewhere, someplace, I had caught the sound of these geese. And I'm looking up, and now I can't hear it anymore, you see, because of traffic and because I am conscious of it, which is another reason why you lose the taste and the smell of something very subtle when you become aware of it. So I couldn't hear it anymore, but I'm looking up there, and I see this long skein of geese moving, and they're heading out. And interestingly enough, I would say that maybe 5 minutes after they passed over the music hall, they must have been out over water. I don't know whether anybody else saw it. Of course, there must have been other flocks that went over that day. But it was a fantastic sight. And during that instant, I felt as though, what is it? What is it? And let me tell you about the birds and the geese and this time of the year. That at this time of the year, it doesn't happen so much in the big cities because you don't have this kind of a roosting area, this kind of a nesting area. But out in the Midwest, there were times at this time of the year when, I'm serious when I say this, when the sky was covered with birds. I mean, as far as you could see, great V formations of geese moving. And always at an enormous altitude. And once in a while you'd see a lower flying formation, a lower flying group of ducks, usually mallards, would be canvasbacks occasionally moving. And you'd see them flying at different levels. And then the wild flights that would come would be once in a while, there would be great flights. Have you ever seen a great migratory flight of swallows? This is an impossible sight to believe. By the way, they do not fly in formation. Ed, you came from the Midwest. You must have seen this once in a while. And when you see the swallows go, you know that you've seen birds. I'll tell you this. I'll tell you what it really reminds you of, a swallow formation moving on a migratory path. It's like, well, have you ever seen a gang fist fight? I'll tell you what it is. It's like an airborne fist fight, a gang fist fight, moving right over, and they just swarm like bees, these swallows. And they somehow they move forward at the same time, sideways and up and down and around. And it's something to watch. But the sense of this sudden loss, I don't know what it is. I suppose we all have a nostalgia for what is it? Well, I suppose you might say the animal kingdom or the natural thing that we have sprung from. Of course, this leads us to a lot of theological and philosophical confusion. Because it is a quite evident fact that we are part of the animal world, whether we like it or not. Here we are, we breathe, we eat, we operate the same way. But we have an additional thing, and that is the thing that makes us the most dangerous creature on the face of the earth. That we have, for example, vindictiveness, which other animals don't have. We have love for nothing but ourselves, which other animals don't have. They don't have any kind of love at all that we can see, even though all the French poodle owners are going to immediately scream at that one. There has never been anything proved along that line. The French poodle. Remember, lady, it's a dog. D-O-G, dog. A-N-I-M-A-L, animal, dog, like the seals. Okay, so the problem, of course, is complicated by the fact that we have all these various things. Speaking of dogs, this is WOR AM and FM New York. It's a funny thing, what reminds you of things. We have here, yes, new tire prices topple. Cash in on your General Tire dealer's big bargain bonanza for brand new tubeless tires. Okay? You go down and see them. Oh, the other night I was talking about this new microphone we're working in here. And one of our listener types called in and says, that microphone makes you sound more like a Midwesterner. Of course, he did not realize that at the time I was doing a story in dialect about the Midwest. Yes, indeed. Now, look, I can tell you... Sorry, it slips. This microphone here is bad. It's got a bad connection. It slips into an occasional funny thing, a Midwestern. Then it, from time to time, can even go far east, all the way up there in Maine, But while we're on the subject, though, of the animals and the geese, I'm not going to talk any more about this because it's getting to the point now where the thing is really getting, I'd say, into the area of mass insanity. And that's this discussion of the ethics of the air raid shelter. I have a lot of things to say about it, but I'm not going to say all the things that I feel. And the most intriguing thing that I have noticed about let's say the people who are analyzing the ethics of the air raid shelter and have come up with the answer that it is ethical to kill your neighbor if he's trying to get into your air raid shelter is the language they use. Invariably, the language seems to take the form of attacker or aggressor, even in the case of some of the more virulent of them. to refer to a man who is under attack by the common enemy. Remember, he's not attacking your home. The enemy is attacking both of you. Now, to consider him as an aggressor or an attacker because he is seeking shelter is an interesting definition of the word attack. And to be able to define that word in such a way that you somehow can give a moral basis to killing a man for, quote, attack. Now, perhaps you are not aware of what's been going on, and I will have to preface this little discussion here with the fact that recently several prominent theologians have come out with the startling news that it is ethical if you have built an air raid shelter and your neighbor is not with an air raid shelter, and if the attack comes and you're in your shelter and he wants to come in and take shelter with you and insists upon it, it is ethical for you to shoot him, kill him if necessary, on the grounds that this is called protecting your family. Well, it seems that there are two ethics involved. One of them seems to say that if a man has a wife and family, this gives him a different ethic from a man who does not have that. That's an interesting stretching of morality points. I was not quite aware that they were that stretchable, but apparently they are. That's another thing. But one of the things that is an intriguing aspect to the whole discussion is that you are justifying killing on a moral basis of attack. In short, your killing is justified if you have defined this man's attempt to get into your shelter to seek shelter from an enemy attack which is coming from without, and which, by the way, he has no control over, no more than you have. You are defining this attempt to gain shelter as an attack. Now, since you have defined it that way, this means then that you are giving a moral justification to killing as long as your home is under attack. This seems to be the chief argument that these people give, that if your home, if your family is under attack, that anything is justified, that killing is justified. Well, it all resolves itself into the word attack, the justification of attack. This means that you're probably aware that this justifies almost every war that's ever been fought. Because any nation can use that word attack, can use that word and can in many, many various real ways define it to fit their own convenience. In other words, a Russian considers himself under attack if you refuse to allow him to carry out a scheme which you consider illegal. So he says he's attacking the welfare of our people. This man is an aggressor. That's why defense can become an aggressive act. And as a matter of fact, as you are aware, that defense was considered an aggressive act in many areas in Korea during the Korean War because of the interesting type of definition given to the word attack. Are you following this semantical discussion? In short, you had better be careful when you start to give a moral basis to killing. And when you base it on the very, very flexible definition of the word attack on my home. Because your home can be many things. Your home can also be the psychological and the philosophical and the political climate in which you live. And so if a man is attacking the political home that you live in, this could justify your killing of him. Are you aware of that? Under this interesting definition. Now, what has intrigued me so much about it is that most of the defense for this very interesting kind of ethic has come from theologians of one kind or another. And intriguingly enough, most of them have tried to apply theological grounds for their definitions, neatly sidestepping one of the most important of all commandments, which flatly says, thou shalt not kill. Plump, just says it. It doesn't say if, and, but, or why. It just says you shouldn't. But that's, again, too easy to point out. However, I'd like to read to you a letter that I received from one, and I will not even discuss, I will not tell you the place or the name of it. Let's say it's written on the stationery of a church, and it's signed by the man who is in charge of this church. He goes on to say, by the way, they refer to the fact that anyone who discusses this problem as having misunderstood the point. That anyone, for example, a bishop recently came out and was appalled at the idea that people could justify killing in the air raid shelter problem. And this man refers to that man as having misunderstood the problem. That's an interesting catch-all, but he does not say where he misunderstood or how. I'm afraid that what he did was to understand it too well. That you can understand a thing so well that you are considered by those who refuse to understand as having misunderstood. You understand what I'm saying there? Here I will quote him. He says, "Old shepherd," he says, "I know that you value an honest opinion." And remember, this is a man who is an accredited leader of a church. "When it comes to moralizing on bomb shelters, I think you're an ox. Good-natured, but a little slow." You see, because what I'm doing is taking the Christian attitude. That is, of course, often very, very ox-like in connection with most churches. In connection with this, I enclose another clipping from today's Times concerning Bishop Dunn, who at least quotes his source correctly. Incidentally, I quoted the same source and exactly the same way that Bishop Dunn did. He says, before he misunderstands it. "Is it also unjust to defend one's home? No. The implication that is, now see, what he says is that anybody who tries to get into a shelter is attacking your home. This is not true. Your air raid shelter, first of all, is not your home. Secondly, he is not attacking your home. He is asking for your charity. Now, the assumption that this man is going to come in covered with fallout dust or radiation dust is very specious. Because if he is alive and is trying to get into your air raid shelter, it is very, very shortly and almost momentarily before a bomb will explode. It is very doubtful whether he'll be alive much longer or would even be there to do it. This is another thing where I think most people misunderstand the idea of why an air raid shelter. It is not dangerous to allow someone to come into your shelter. He is not any more covered with radiation or fallout dust more than you are, unless he happens to wander in 2 months later, and I doubt whether you'd even be there. But anyway, he goes on to say, "The shepherd," and remember, this is a man who's the head of a church speaking. He says, "The shepherd believe in those perpetrators of brotherly love." How can you perpetrate brotherly love? And he quotes it. It's always in quote, brotherly love. "Who try to break into bomb shelters." They're not trying to get in to be sheltered. They're trying to break into bomb shelters. What I'm trying to impress on you here is the significant thing is the language that is being used by these people. The language is all that of an enemy attacking you, which makes it very easy to destroy a man as long as you consider him an enemy. If I consider a poor bum on 6th Avenue who comes up and asks me for a dime as an aggressor, as an attacker, it makes it very easy for me to hit him in the eye. And it makes it very simple. Now, I would like to ask this same man. Of course, he assumes that he will be in the shelter or that the good people will be in their shelters. What about all those good people who won't be, who have made shelters, who are on their way home from the office at 4:10 when the bomb hits at 4:12, and they have to run out on the street and look for a place to hide? They've done the best they could. Their family, by the way, is with them. They've been to the theater, to a matinee. And their shelter is up in Wilton, Connecticut. Now they're out running around on the streets. Are they aggressors? Are they attackers? Are they perpetrators of brotherly love when they come and knock on the door? A very interesting question. Under his definition, yes. They are attackers, aggressors. This is the same kind of language, you know, that the dialectic communists use. That anyone can be called an aggressor. That's a fascinating word. And he refers to it as defending oneself. And he says, no, not defending oneself out of love for the attacking party. Who says you're asked to be... No one's asking you to love the attacking party. There's an angry one calling. No, are they for us? Huh? They're pro? I can't understand you. They're poor. For. Oh, they're bored? Oh, well, a lot of people are bored. Well, then you go down the dial. You'll find something that doesn't bore you, dear. You go on down. I don't care whether you're bored. It does not make a particle of difference to me whether you're bored or not. And as a matter of fact, boredom always springs within the person himself. You've heard the old cliche. So if you're bored, go on down to the Howard Johnson, get yourself one of the 28 flavors. Go on. Turn on the TV set, you clown. I mean, don't... And write an angry letter to the management, too. That'll give you something to do. Go on. That'll get you on the stick. Go on, hurry up. I'm tired of listening to this boredom talk. I'm bored, as a matter of fact. I'm bored with 97% of the idiots who write and call and say, please play this tune. Please talk about please blow your nose flute. Please talk about your Aunt Minnie. Talk about boredom. Well, the facts of the matter are, I think that from time to time somebody should say something about some of the idiotic ethical problems that are facing us. And that when people are continually ducking out of the issue and glossing over it, I think this is an interesting kind of immorality. So some clown calls up and says he's bored. What do you expect me to do? I start blowing the nose flute? That's the trouble with many Americans, is they're too easily bored, that the world has to be showbiz to them. And if it isn't showbiz, they're bored. Oh, I'm bored. Will you tell this idiot to please get off that subject, for heaven's sakes? Who cares about his ridiculous little subject? For heaven's sakes. Please, Madge, will you? Get rid of that fool. All right, fine. But I may be. But I'm furious when I get letters from people who are professional Christians, who use their professional standards standing, I should say, not standards even, to defend a fantastically and grossly immoral act. And I'm not going to say any more about it, except to say that when you begin to define the word aggression and attack as a man coming to your place looking for help, this is a fascinating definition of attack or aggression. You realize that. And if you justify killing on that interesting kind of morality, be careful, because it could very well boomerang. And I can only say that this sort of thing, if sufficiently publicized, would give the rest of the world a fascinating insight to how selfish Americans really can be. And I hope we're not. I hope this is a tiny minority of us who is making all this noise. One of the most interesting spokesmen in favor of sanity recently has been John Crosby, out of the Herald Tribune. I don't often read byline columns per se, and I don't have the permission of the Herald Tribune to do this, but I'm going to do it anyway. Here's what Crosby says, and of course Mr. Crosby is much more official than Mr. Shepard. I'm sure you know that. He writes for a paper, you know, a very good Republican paper at that. And so that makes him a good man, actually. A little cracked, of course, but he's a good man. By John Crosby, more on fallout etiquette. John put her there. I'm with you, Dad. How to behave in the fallout shelter age. As the King of Siam used to say, it's a puzzlement. The accepted thing now is that one shoots down the neighbor who comes pounding on your shelter door. Why didn't the lazy drone build his own shelter? All summer long, when you paused in the digging, you found him putting or pruning the rose bushes, maybe even reading, the fool. All highly unprofitable operations. He should have been breaking his back and emptying his bank account on his own shelter. So have no hesitation, right between the eyes. Remember, squeeze, don't jerk the trigger. You learned how to do it back in the infantry. Squeeze it, Dad. Don't jerk the trigger. Get him good. However, some small points of etiquette have arisen. One reader queries, suppose the attack comes at a dinner party. You had invited the guests for drinks and dinner, but not for the participation in the fallout shelter. The bomb falls, let us say, just after dessert and just during the brandy. But then just how do you go about getting them out into the radioactive air, getting rid of these guests, you know? I mean, without hurting their feelings, actually. Just how do you put that into words? Or as they say now, how do you verbalize that one, big boy? Well, normally I, meaning John Crosby, pass these things on to Amy Vanderbilt. But she seems to have stepped out for a minute. Well, frankly, I think the jovial approach is best. Later. Well, here's your hat. There's the door. Pardon me for not showing you to the gate, but my doctor told me that radioactive dust isn't good for my sinus. I'll see you sometime, George. So long. Yes, you ought to get a big laugh easy there. Nothing like danger to bring on a fit of giggles among your guests. Of course, there is a school of thought among the etiquette crowd that says it might be kinder to shoot the guests right there at the dinner table. Quicker that way, you know, neater, more merciful, actually. I can't go along with this. It's rude, I believe, to shoot people at the dinner table, even with the kindest of motives. There's been too great a lowering of barriers already. Hardly anyone dresses for dinner anymore. More's the pity, but by Jove, one doesn't shoot one's friend at the dinner table. Bad enough to have to do it in the boudoir, if you catch them at it. But never, never at the dinner table. All straight now at that? right, no shooting at the dinner table. While we're on the subject, we might as well press on. Let's take the matter of engraved invitations. I think this might be suitable. Mr. and Mrs. John Doe request the pleasure of the company of Mr. Richard Rowe at cocktails and dinner Thursday, the 29th of June at 8 o'clock, RSVP. And then at the lower right hand, I think, very, very unobtrusively, the fallout shelter is unfortunately not included in this invitation. In the event of emergency, the host and hostess extend their best wishes and the devout hope that they will see you again, sometime, somewhere. That handles that. And then, of course, there's another school of thought that harbors the old-fashioned notion that fallout shelters aren't funny. Well, here's where I agree with John. Oh, they are. They are, too. If there's anything funnier than a backyard fallout shelter trying to provide protection against the 20-megaton hydrogen bomb, I can't think what it is. A 20-megaton bomb could wipe out Chicago and start fires in Wisconsin. That's true. So, while putting up your sandbags in the backyard, you might spur yourself on by recollecting that a 15-megaton bomb dropped by the U.S. Air Force on the Marshall Islands in 1952 vaporized a 12-mile island, leaving in its place a hole in the ocean floor a mile long and 175 feet wide. Maybe you better make that 2 sandbags, quick. So, what I say is, drones, let the other fellows dig into the hard ground. Work on your putting. Mow the lawn. It's more useful. Put her there, John. Well, I'll have one final thing to say on this. I do not think the fallout shelters are not necessary. I do not think that fallout shelters are. I think, however, that fallout shelters should be a community effort. And I think that they should be part of the same defense mechanism that has created the radar system, the dual line. They should be part of the same defense system that has created, let's say, anti-rocket rockets, that has created interceptor fighters. And I think that it is up to us as responsible people to see that there is shelter provided for everyone. And then there wouldn't be this insane, ridiculous argument going on. But since obviously we feel this would cost us something, we prefer to allow it to go a hit and miss and a ridiculous kind of childish putting together little pieces system. And by the way, one more interesting thing about it is that apparently many, many people are making a lot of money off of it. This seems to not bother too many people. I think it's an immoral thing. Many people are making much money off of it, and so hence there obviously must be pressures to keep this from becoming a community effort. I am making no accusations. I am just stating an opinion. The whole thing, I think, has had it, as far as I'm concerned. I am not going to discuss it any longer. I do feel, however, that... it's interesting, the number of angry calls that people will call up. Oh, boy, they're going to defend their wife and children. I'm not arguing about defending your wife and children. This isn't the question. No one is arguing you shouldn't defend your wife and children. But you are still trying to convince me that a man coming to your shelter asking for shelter is attacking your wife and children. This is an interesting definition of attack. Fascinating definition. What would you do if it was a 7-year-old boy? Maybe even your boy. Is he an attacker? Is he an aggressor? Oh, no, your child's going to be in the shelter, I'm sure. I'm sure. Wouldn't you expect someone to allow him to come into a shelter if he's caught, say, 4 miles away at the playground when it happens and no one can get at him? Your station wagon can't get through the rubble? Oh, sure. Some nice person will take him in. Oh, no. Not if you make this the general rule. You better be careful before you call angrily and talk about defending your wife and children. Other people may have to do it. Remember that. Other people may have to defend your wife and children, in which case you'd better hope that there are a few Samaritans around of the good type. And just be careful. I am not arguing a man being selfish and saying, look, I built my shelter, I'm going to kill anybody that comes. Fine. That's up to you. But don't give me a moral argument about it. That's hard to do. Very difficult to do. It doesn't make any difference how many official theologians you can get who will go along with it. It's still difficult. Very difficult. But you know, getting back to the geese, the funny thing about those geese, I'm not sure that the geese or any of the rest of the things in the world are even remotely concerned, nor are they can't comprehend what could very well happen to the globe that's operated, controlled, and owned by all of us. Here those geese were up there flying away there as if there was nothing happening. They weren't looking for a shelter. They were just flapping away. Way up there, a mile above Rockefeller Center, heading home. And it was a funny thing, you know. I saw them, and I suddenly, it was as though something got back into focus for a moment there. That there is something else out there. There is a world out there. Of course, you know, you can define that word aggression in a lot of different ways. I think one of the dangers, I really do believe, one of the dangers of the home backyard shelter is that it gives a man a feeling of false confidence. Is that it gives a man a feeling that he is ready in case a war comes, and the war isn't going to bother him. And for that reason, the idea of war does not disturb him nearly as much as it should. He's the kind of guy that will make the ridiculous comments. He's got the 2 weeks thing there, you see. Little understanding the fact that almost everybody in reasonable distance of a prime target area would be cooked like a poor old sardine in that little sad shelter that he's built for himself. Cooked or buried, one or the other. But that's, again, you see, beside the point. I suppose those old geese are flapping away. They flap something like backwards, you know. It's an interesting thing, the way those geese fly. Have you ever watched a goose fly? You ever seen one fly? Well, look, if you get the time someday around, if you're walking out, I would like to suggest this is the time of the year to do it, you know. If you're walking on the side streets in New York, keep your eyes on the sky, particularly in late afternoon. That's when you'll see them. Late afternoon, heading over high, way high, because they do move awfully high. And at first glance, you might mistake them for, really you can't mistake them for anything, because they don't look like anything really in nature. Just keep your, the angry ones are crawling tonight. And none of them have any real reasoning behind it, really, I'm sure of it. Except that it's all based on the business of my wife and children. They keep hollering, my wife and children. My wife and children. Well, I don't know. It's interesting. I'd like to read to you a very interesting little thing here. Do you know that there was a law passed in 1942 in New Jersey? If you're going to become legal about it, it could never be passed today because people don't believe it. In 1942, the New Jersey state statutes annotated have under 2A 170-11 the following notation. Air raid shelter, refusal to admit or person to remain. Here's the law on it. Any person who refuses to another person access to a place of safety or shelter, or refuses to permit a person to remain in a place of safety or shelter during an air raid or air raid practice alarm because of such person's race, creed, color, national origin, or ancestry, is a disorderly person. You couldn't pass that law now. Because I don't think people would permit it. And, of course, disorderly person, what does that mean? Who worries about disorder when A bombs or N bombs or H bombs or Q bombs are falling? That's the ultimate in disorder. And I would say that the ultimate in disorder comes, I say the ultimate is far beyond physical. It's when psychological and philosophical, our mores begin to break down. This is the true ultimate disorder. And I'm always a little concerned when I find that this breakdown quite often takes a moral tone. A moral tone. Are you aware that many of the crimes that were perpetrated by dictators in Europe within the past 20 years were perpetrated on the basic idea that other people who were innocent people were literally attacking their homes and their livelihoods merely by existing in the same block? This is one of the things that Hitler used as the basis for his mass killings, you know. He says these people are a danger to our way of life, these innocent people. And using his definition of attack and danger, there you are. It all depends on what you call attack. It all depends on what you call danger, and interestingly enough, it all depends on what you call defense. So you can scream and yell and holler, but you have your definition, I have mine. I hope yours is right. For your sake. It could be very well a very interesting set of answers that you'll have to give someday for it. And it might take a lot of rationalization. But then again, I must say this before we leave. I think that this is a tempest in a teacup. I think that there are a few people talking, and the vast majority of Americans, and I do believe this, and I don't think this is a namby-pamby attitude. I think the vast majority of Americans would allow their neighbor to come into their shelter. They couldn't turn the other way. They just couldn't. Because they themselves are alive. They themselves are out of shelters most of their lives in one way or the other. So I think this is a tempest in a teacup. And it's one of those philosophical arguments that occasionally pop up in man's time that seem to be of fantastic importance, but never seem to be acted out. I think that in the case of actual attack, we would act differently. And in fact, I love to think so. I hope so. Keep your knees loose, Dad. Just keep them loose.